Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are getting closer to ending the life of Daniel. But today we are going to be looking at the historicity of Scripture. Not only is it a book that gives us spiritual advice and encouragement, but there is a lot in Scripture that we can actually see within global history. And today is definitely going to be the case. Turn to Daniel chapter 11. So Daniel chapters 11 and 12 are actually one very big vision at the end of the life of Daniel. But today we're going to look at just Daniel 11, 1 through 20, and then we will look at the rest on Tuesday of next week, and then we will finish up the life of Daniel next Thursday. But today, let's turn to Daniel chapter 11, verse 1. And as for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. The me that's being talked about here is probably an angel, maybe the angel Gabriel. As being referenced here, could be the encouragement to write the proclamation that Cyrus, king of Persia, gives that the Jews can go back to Jerusalem, which right off the bat, fascinating stuff. Then verse 2. But before we get to that, I do want to mention that a lot of these dates and these names that I will be throwing in today, I did get from the Christ Centered Exposition Commentary over the book of Daniel, written by Danny Aiken, edited by David Platt, Danny Aiken, and Tony Merida. So do check it out. This is pages 138 to 144. But it is fascinating how accurate this vision is. And it's covering centuries after the life of Daniel. But let's start with verse 2. And now I will show you the truth. Behold, three more kings shall arise in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion, and do as he wills. And as soon as he is arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. So you have the mention of three kings after Darius the Mede and Cyrus. These are probably referencing Cambyses, who reigned from 530 to 522 BC, Smerdis in 522 BC, and then Darius the First from 522 to 486 BC. However, they're all dwarfed by the riches and the military might of Xerxes the First, who reigns from 486 to 465 BC. And Xerxes the First does attack Greece and fails, but he does attack Greece in the Battle of Salamis, which takes place in about 480 BC. And then this sets the stage for Alexander the Great, who I think is being referenced in verses 3 and 4. How do we know if it's the Alexander the Great? Most likely just because of how this individual is described. He's described as mighty, somebody that comes up, he shall arise. So somebody that comes up very unexpectedly, somebody very quickly that arises, and then he shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. He is a mastermind of sorts when it comes to military might, and that is, Alexander the Great. Not only that, but how his kingdom is described after his fall, which comes very quickly. In verse 4, is given to four different regions that also is seen within Alexander the Great after his death in about 323 BC. And his kingdom is divided into four different regions. Uh, Here, though, we are going to be focusing on just two of them, the north and the south. So the north, again, it's looked at in a very Israel-centric way, because again, this is being given to Daniel, who is from Israel, from Jerusalem. So is being looked at that from that angle. And so when you're talking about the north, we're talking about Syria and Macedonia, or the Seleucid Empire. And then when we're talking about the south, we're talking about your Egypt area, or the Ptolemaic Empire. So, with that being said, let's dive into this history. This is fascinating how accurate this is with the details in it as well. So, verse 5. Then the king of the south shall be strong. This was most likely referencing to Ptolemy the First, who was very, very strong ruler, reigned from 323 to 285 BC. But one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority. Honestly, this could be referencing to Seleucus the First, who reigns from 312 to about 280 BC. He actually did support Ptolemy the First for a time, and then fled, and then went up north. And so I think that's probably what that is being referenced to. Verse 6. After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure, but she shall be given up in her attendance, he who fathered her and he who supported her in those times. And this is fascinating how accurate this is with global history between these two regions. So you have Ptolemy the Second, who reigned from 285 to 246 BC. You have him actually making a treaty with the northern ruler at that time, Antiochus II, who reigned from 261 to 246 BC. And that treaty is about 250 BC. That's when that takes place. So Berenice, who is Ptolemy II's daughter, is actually given to Antiochus II to be his wife. However, this does not go well because Antiochus II was already married to a woman named Laodice, and Laodice then took out revenge against Berenice by killing Antiochus II, Berenice, and their child. The child of Antiochus II, Berenice. And so we see all of that in verse 6 when it's talking about she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and then he and his arm shall not endure. Well, that definitely comes together with the murder plot of Laodice against Antiochus II and Berenice. But then he keeps going. And so you have this agreement, but then this horrible thing happens. And then, well, it starts up all over again. And from a branch from her roots, I think this is referencing the roots of Berenice, or the southern kingdom. One shall arise in his place. He shall come against the army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he shall deal with them and shall prevail. He shall also carry off to Egypt their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold. And for some years he shall refrain from attacking the king of the north. Then the latter shall come into the realm of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. So here we're seeing Berenice's brother, Ptolemy III, who reigned from about 246 to 221 BC. Well, he's not very happy about the death of Berenice, and so he takes it out on the northern kingdom, and he starts war against them, which lasts from about 246 to 241 BC. This war starts with Seleucus II in the north. Then you have Ptolemy the Third capture loot and capture the capital of the northern kingdoms, Antioch, or the fortress of the king of the north, which is talked about, which is referenced here in verse 7. And then not only that, but then Ptolemy the Third does take all of this stuff and sends out all of this stuff that is talked about in verse 8. Um, However, the King of the North does come back into play, um, and that is against Seleucus II. But his sons come back up into power in verse 10. His sons shall wage war and assemble a multitude of great forces, which shall keep coming and overflow and pass through, and again shall carry the war as far as his fortress. Then the king of the south. So we'll go to the north again. So the sons that are mentioned here are probably Seleucus III, and then who reigned from 226 to 223 BC, and then Antiochus III, or Antiochus the Great, who reigned from 223 to 187 BC, which continued this fight with the southern kingdom. And they do a great job at it. They definitely conquer for a time, but then the king of the south gets mad at that. So, verse 11, then the king of the south, moved with rage, shall come out and fight against the king of the north, and he shall raise a great multitude, but shall be given into his hand. And when the multitude is taken away, his heart shall be exalted, and he shall cast down tens of thousands, but he shall not prevail. For the king of the north shall again raise a multitude greater than the first, and after some years he shall come on with a great army and abundant supplies. So the king of the south in verse 11 is most likely referencing to Ptolemy IV, who reigned from 221 to 203 BC. And he did beat Antiochus III at Raphia in about 217 BC, and because of that, Ptolemy IV does indeed get very arrogant, which we talk about, which we see in verse 12. And when the multitude is taken away, his heart shall be exalted. That is being referenced there. However, as we see in verse 13, the king of the north shall again raise a multitude greater than the first. So Antiochus III comes back against the south kingdom, and he does invade. He does indeed invade the southern kingdom. And this is around the time of Ptolemy V coming into power in the south, who lived from 203 to 181 BC. So you have all of this take place, and we see this in detail in this vision centuries before this even happens. Fascinating stuff, but we're not even done yet. So then we go to verse 14. In those times many shall rise against the king of the south, and the violent among your own people shall lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they shall fail. So you have this fight against Ptolemy V. And many, including people, when it's talking about violent ones amongst your own people, it's talking about people or Jews that actually helped Antiochus III, and that did indeed happen for Antiochus III. But their defeats came at the hands of an Egyptian general, Scopas, who defeated them, and that was mainly seen at the Battle of Panium in about 199 BC, and at a very resounding victory, which we see in verse 15. So then the king of the north shall come, but that's so the king of the south has his day, but then you have Antiochus III come back in a very good campaign and wins. Verse 15, then the king of the north shall come and throw up siege works and take a well fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not stand, or even his best troops, for there shall be no strength to stand. So this is talking about Antiochus III's attack against the southern kingdom at the Battle of Panium in about 199 BC, that great victory that is being talked about. That well fortified city is probably referencing Sidon, Sidon, and that takes place around 198 BC. So you have then Antiochus III take over a great amount of land, which actually does include Israel. Verse 16, but he who comes against him shall do as he wills, and none shall stand before him. That's talking about Antiochus III. And he shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his hand. He shall set his face to come with the strength of his whole kingdom, and he shall bring terms of an agreement and perform them. He shall give him the daughter of women to destroy the kingdom, but shall not stand or be to his advantage. This again is really, really interesting. So Antiochus III conquering or overseeing Israel for a time should be a glimpse at Antiochus IV Epiphanes' very much more destructive taking over of Israel, which we will talk about on Tuesday. But here you do have another peace treaty, but is more forced. Antiochus III gives his daughter Cleopatra, but not that Cleopatra. But Cleopatra is given to Ptolemy V as a wife. But the problem is that Cleopatra actually then gives up on her father, Antiochus III, and sides with Ptolemy V. And that is what is talked about in detail, is talked about at the end of verse 17, but shall not stand or be to his advantage. Again, remarkable detail is being mentioned here. And then you have Antiochus III trying to take over the Mediterranean area, but does not go well. Verse 18, afterward he shall turn his face to the coastlands, and shall capture many of them, but a commander shall put an end to his insolence. Indeed, he shall turn his insolence back upon him. Then he shall turn his face back toward the fortresses of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and shall not be found. So Antiochus III goes into the Mediterranean area, but is stopped by Lucius Cornelius Scipio, and that gentleman is probably the commander that is being talked about here, that is in verse 18, that then defeats him, and defeats him so soundly, in probably referencing the Battle of Magnesia in about 190 BC, that Antiochus III then has to flee back to the north, but then when he gets there, he's not welcomed well. Instead, an angry mob of his own people kills Antiochus III in 187 BC. And so when it is talking about his end, in verse 19, he shall stumble and fall and shall not be found, that is definitely referencing to his murder by his own people, by the hand of his own people in his own land. Again, remarkable detail being referenced within this vision centuries before it even happens. And then finally, you have verse 20. Then shall arise in his place one, Antiochus III's place, one who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. This is probably referencing, most likely referencing, to Seleucus IV, who reigned from 187 to 175 BC, and he does actually send a tax collector of sorts, Heliodorus, to get taxes. But as seen, that does not go well for Seleucus Fourth, and when it is talked about here, neither in anger nor in battle, there's no angry mob like with Antiochus III. There is no military defeat where Seleucus IV passes away in battle. So it's most likely referencing to a poisoning of some sorts, which we do believe is how is how uh, is how Seleucus IV passed away. And we actually can see some sort of evidence that Heliodorus may have been the one to actually do it, but even more so, Antiochus IV Epiphanes could have also helped with the overthrow of Seleucus IV, which then sets up the reign of Antiochus IV in 175 BC. And that is who we will turn to next Tuesday as we dive back into Antiochus IV. But here, so much history. So, first off, for me, it makes me just so giddy with excitement to see just the global history within Scripture. That is incredible to see. It's important to see because, again, it shows me that Scripture is not just a spiritual document, even though it is. But it is a document with actual people, actual culture, actual history that has happened in global history past. And so I think that is incredible to see, important to see. But more important above all of that is that God works the details all the way down to global history. And what a joy and what a journey that is to see with you today. I know it took a little while and with a lot of names and dates, but I want you to be marveled at the historicity of Scripture. So, with that being said, thanks for spending a little time with me today. We will dive back into Daniel chapter 11 on Tuesday. But thanks for spending time with me today. Thanks.